Another element of accountability that often gets ignored when we're talking about decentralization and local governance is the fact that there are often many channels of accountability at the local level in developing countries. And so we tend to focus on one of them depending on what our orientation is. And if you're a decentralization person, you tend to focus on local governments. And that's great, except that local governments often exist with in the same space with multiple other accountability mechanisms, and this can affect the way that people view local governments and the ability of local governments to exercise their autonomy in order to be accountable to their constituents. So, for example, many countries continue to have deconcentrated agencies of central government ministries. Some have parallel geographically contiguous to local government administrative subdivisions, and these subdivisions may have their own offices. In some countries, you also have community-driven development type projects, and these mechanisms get resources directly down to citizens, bypassing local governments, and often operate through community-based organizations and non-governmental organizations. And in some countries, you have funds that are channeled through parliaments and congresses in a way that actually is used on functions that are supposed to be local government functions. So to give a concrete example on this, the old system in Kenya, which has been replaced by the 2010 Constitution, had a system of provincial and district administration that was deconcentrated. It had a system of local governments that were basically like semi-autonomous local authorities that had their own functions and revenue sources and so forth. It had a fairly substantial set of community development funds through a community development trust fund that was that channeled resources from the national government down around local authorities. And then several years back, the Parliament passed a constituency development fund bill, which gave them large amounts of money, more or less the equivalent to or more than the amount of money that was in the intergovernmental transfer program to local governments. So in these kinds of environments, particularly where you don't have enough clarity of exactly who's responsible for what, but even if you do, because one of these other entities can infringe on the territory of what local governments are legally supposed to be doing, accountability becomes very convoluted. If I'm a citizen in a particular area and I'm having trouble with a service, who do I go to? Do I go to my local government if it's a local government function? Well, but maybe ministries are still involved in this service, so maybe I should go to the ministry or local ministry office or the district commissioner. Or maybe there are some NGOs providing this service through money that they get from community development funds. And so I go to the community-based organization that's doing this. Or do I go to my member of parliament? And so the problem here, this is an illustration of the fact that if many actors are potentially accountable, nobody's accountable, because the citizens don't know whose responsibility it is to actually provide this service. And this also can undermine possibilities for revenue generation, because why should I pay my local government taxes and fees if I can go to another actor and get the same service for free? Now, this is a bit of a caricature. You know, there are some areas where these various accountability mechanisms can come to some kind of an agreement and work together, but there isn't a mechanism for that to happen. And so I think that we have to be very careful about trying to, for example, support local governments with resources and building technical capacity in an environment where they may not be able to exercise their autonomy and deliver their functions effectively because of these confused accountability channels. And there's one last point on this that I think is worth making. A lot of these mechanisms that emerge, multiple mechanisms that emerge, exist because there are existing systems, and instead of reforming those systems, we plop down another system in the same space, and this is where the confusion comes in. And so institutions that have existed for a while or that were created for a specific purpose are often hard to get rid of. And I think this is another thing that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about developing support programs for decentralization in local governments.